At 2:13 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. The problem was, I live alone, and I hadn't ordered anything. The knock wasn't loud or aggressive. It was 3 soft taps. I stayed perfectly still in my dark living room, the glow of my laptop screen the only thing illuminating the space. Then I heard a wet, dragging sound against the wood of the door, like someone was leaning their entire body weight against it, sliding slowly down to the floor. Why would someone be sitting against my door in the middle of the night? And how did they get past the heavy security gate downstairs? I'm a 26-year-old guy, and at the time this happened, I had just moved into a 3rd-floor apartment in a part of the city that was transitioning, half luxury lofts, half crumbling brick warehouses. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which basically means I have no social life, and I'm awake when the rest of the world is dead. Being alone at night is usually my favorite part of the day. It's quiet, nobody calls me, and the city feels like it belongs to me. My apartment was one of those industrial chic places with high ceilings and huge windows that overlooked a narrow alleyway. I didn't have many neighbors yet because the building was mostly empty. That night was particularly humid. I remember the air felt heavy, and even with the AC humming, I felt a layer of grit on my skin. I was deep into a project, wearing headphones with no music playing, just using them for the noise-canceling effect, when those 3 knocks cut through the silence. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at the door. I don't have a peephole. I have one of those old-fashioned heavy oak doors with a decorative brass plate where a peephole should be. After the dragging sound stopped, it went dead quiet. I told myself it was probably a neighbor who had too much to drink and stumbled into the wrong hallway. It happens, but then I remembered I was the only person living on the 3rd floor. The units on either side of me were still under construction. I walked over to the door, tiptoeing so my floorboards wouldn't creak. I leaned my ear against the wood. At first, I heard nothing. Then I heard breathing. It was ragged, shallow, and sounded like someone was struggling to catch their wind. It was right there, on the other side of the wood, maybe 2 inches from my face. "Hello," I whispered. I don't know why I whispered. I think I was afraid that if I spoke at a normal volume, I'd be inviting whatever it was inside. The breathing stopped instantly. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of footsteps. But they weren't walking away. They were pacing, back and forth, back and forth. The footsteps were heavy, muffled by the hallway carpet, but I could tell the person was walking in a very tight circle directly in front of my entrance. I went back to my desk and picked up my phone. I felt like an idiot calling the police over a pacer, so I decided to check my security camera first. I had installed a small, cheap doorbell camera a few weeks prior because some of my Amazon packages had gone missing from the lobby. I pulled up the app on my phone. The screen was black. Not off black, but covered black. Something was pressed directly against the lens. I refreshed the feed, thinking it was a glitch. As the image buffered and cleared, I realized I wasn't looking at a finger or a piece of tape. I was looking at a human eye. The person was leaning in so close to the camera that there I filled the entire frame. The iris was a pale, washed-out blue, and the eyelid was twitching rhythmically. They weren't moving. They were just staring into the lens, knowing I'd eventually look at the feed. I dropped my phone on the rug. My heart was going so fast it felt like it was skipping beats. I forced myself to pick it up and look again. The eye was gone. Now the camera showed the empty hallway. It was well lit by the recessed LED lights, but there was nobody there. The pacer had vanished. I sat on my couch, gripping a heavy glass paperweight, watching the door for the next 2 hours. Every time the building's old pipes groaned, I jumped. Every time the wind whistled through the alleyway windows, I felt a chill. But the pacer didn't come back. Eventually, the sun started to come up, and the yellow morning light made the whole thing feel like a bad dream. I managed to fall asleep around 7 a.m. The next few days were normal, or as normal as they could be when you're constantly looking over your shoulder. I told the building manager about it, and he checked the main entrance logs. Nobody had buzzed in at 2:13 a.m. He told me it was probably just a phantom glitch with the camera and a stray cat in the hallway. He didn't explain the breathing or the knocks, but he clearly didn't care enough to investigate further. Then came Thursday. I had to go out to a print shop across town to pick up some proofs. I left my apartment around 9 p.m., thinking the fresh air would do me good. As I walked down the 3 flights of stairs, I had that crawling sensation on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I kept looking back, but the stairwell was empty. When I got to my car in the parking lot, I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a small piece of paper, folded neatly into a square. I opened it, expecting a flyer for a pizza place. It was a drawing. It was a crude, hand-drawn sketch of the interior of my apartment. It showed my desk, my laptop, my couch, and the exact position where I had been sitting when the knocks happened. There was an X on the couch where I usually sleep. I felt a wave of nausea. Someone had been looking through my windows. But I'm on the 3rd floor. There are no balconies. The only way to see inside like that would be from the roof of the warehouse across the alley, or from inside the room. I didn't go to the print shop. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove to a bright, 24-hour diner. I sat there drinking coffee until my hands stopped shaking. I called a friend, but he didn't pick up. I realized I was being targeted, but I had no idea why. I wasn't rich. I didn't have enemies. I was just a guy. I decided I couldn't keep running. I had to know what was happening. I went back to the apartment around midnight, armed with a heavy-duty flashlight and a pocket knife I used for opening boxes. I checked the alleyway before going in. Nothing. I checked the stairwell. Nothing. When I got to my door, I noticed a faint smell. It was metallic and sweet, like old copper or rotting fruit. It was coming from the base of my door. I looked down and saw a dark stain on the carpet. It was wet. I reached down and touched it with my finger, then held it up to the light. It was red. I didn't even go inside. I turned around and ran. I stayed at a motel that night, a cheap place near the interstate where the neon sign flickered and the carpet smelled like stale cigarettes. I barely slept. I kept thinking about that drawing. The detail was too perfect. They knew exactly where I sat. The next morning, I went to the police station. I showed them the drawing and the photo I took of the blood on the carpet. The officer behind the desk was sympathetic but blunt. "Look," he said, "without a face on camera or a direct threat of violence, there's not much we can do. We'll send a patrol car by to do a walkthrough, but it's likely just a squatter or a prankster." The patrol car met me at my apartment at noon. 2 officers walked through my place. They checked the closets, under the bed, and the bathroom. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The blood on the carpet in the hallway had been cleaned up. Not just faded, completely gone. The carpet was damp and smelled like heavy-duty bleach. "You sure about that blood, kid?" one of the officers asked, looking at me like I was losing my mind. "I have a photo," I shouted, pulling up my phone. I swiped through my gallery. The photo of the blood was gone. In its place was a video I didn't remember taking. I hit play. The video was 30 seconds long. It was shot from inside my bedroom, looking out toward the living room. It was dark, but you could see me. I was asleep on the couch. The camera moved slowly toward me, hovering just inches above my face. Then a hand reached out, a thin, gray hand with long, dirty fingernails, and gently stroked my hair. A voice whispered, "Not yet." The officers saw it. Their entire demeanor changed. They called for backup and a forensics team. They realized that someone hadn't just been knocking on my door. They were inside my phone, and they were inside my home while I slept. The peak of the terror didn't come from the video, though. It came about 20 minutes later when the forensics tech was checking my windows for prints. "Hey," she called out from the kitchen. "You might want to see this." She was pointing at the large, industrial window that overlooked the alleyway. In the bottom corner, there was a small, perfectly round hole drilled through the glass. It was so small you'd never notice it unless you were looking for it. Through that hole, a thin wire had been fed. She followed the wire. It didn't go to a microphone or a camera. It went behind my radiator, where it was attached to a small, mechanical device I'd never seen before. It was a solenoid, a little piston that clicks when it receives an electric pulse. "What is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's a remote-controlled tapper," she said. "Someone wasn't knocking on your door from the hallway. They were triggering this from outside. They wanted you to think they were at the door so you'd go to it." I realized then that while I was staring at the front door, listening to the breathing and the pacing, the person wasn't there at all. The eye on the camera, a recorded loop fed into my app. The breathing, a small speaker hidden in the hallway light fixture. It was all a distraction. If they weren't at the door, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical weight. Then where were they? The forensics tech didn't answer. She just pointed up. Above my couch, there was a decorative drop ceiling panel, the only one in the entire apartment, installed to hide some old piping. It was slightly askew. One of the officers got a ladder and pushed the panel aside. He shone his flashlight into the crawl space. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he climbed down, his face pale. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." In the crawl space above my couch, they found a nest. It was lined with my stolen clothes, shirts I thought I'd lost in the laundry, a blanket from the back of my closet. There were dozens of photos of me, taken from angles I couldn't understand. But the most disturbing part was the timer. Scrawled on the underside of the ceiling were dates and times, a long list of them. October 12 to 3 a.m., REM sleep. October 14 to 2:15 a.m., heart rate up. October 15 to 4 a.m., deep sleep. Touched his hand. The list went back 3 months, to the day I moved in. The person hadn't been a stranger. They had been living 3 feet above me for 90 days. They had watched me eat, sleep, work, and dress. They knew my schedule better than I did. The knocking at the door was just a game, a way to see how I'd react, to watch my fear from above while I looked in the wrong direction. They never caught him. The police found a secondary exit through the building's ventilation system that led to the roof. From there, he could have jumped to the neighboring warehouse and disappeared into the city. They found a backpack in the crawl space containing a laptop, a high-end signal jammer, and a collection of keys that fit every unit in the building. I moved out that afternoon. I didn't even pack most of my stuff. I just left. I moved to a different state, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media. I live in a house now. No shared walls, no crawl spaces, no drop ceilings. I've spent thousands on a professional security system that is hardwired, not Wi-Fi dependent. But the aftermath is a slow rot. I can't sit on a couch anymore without looking at the ceiling. I can't sleep unless the lights are full on. Every time I hear a click or a tap, my heart rate spikes to 140. I've become an expert on security, on locks, on the ways people can invade your space. I know more about dwellers and phrogging than anyone should ever have to know. I thought I was safe until about 3 weeks ago. I was at a grocery store in my new town, standing in the checkout line. It was a busy Saturday morning, totally normal. As I was bagging my groceries, the person behind me leaned in a bit too close. I felt that familiar, cold chill. "You changed your hair, David," a voice whispered. It was that same wet, shallow voice from the video. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. But the person behind me was just an older woman in a sun hat, looking confused. Behind her was a young guy on his phone. Nobody was looking at me. Nobody was whispering. I rushed out to my car, my hands shaking so much I could barely get the key in the ignition. I told myself I was hallucinating, that it was just PTSD, that my mind was playing tricks on me because I was tired. But when I got home and started putting my groceries away, I found something in the bottom of one of the brown paper bags. It was a small mechanical solenoid, a tapper, and tucked into the battery compartment was a tiny scrap of paper with a hand-drawn map of my new house. There was an X on the pantry. I haven't opened my pantry in 3 days. I've been sitting in my kitchen with a shotgun, watching the door. I know he's in there. I can hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of the piston against the wood. He's not trying to get in anymore. He's already in. He just wants me to know that no matter where I go, no matter how many locks I buy, he's the one who decides when the lights go out. I'm looking at the pantry door right now. The handle is slowly, silently turning. I think the worst part isn't that he's here. It's that I've started to realize he's not a squatter. He's not a thief. He's something much more patient. He's a shadow that found a home, and I'm just the furniture he's decided to keep. If you're listening to this, do me a favor. Go to your living room, stand in the center of the floor, and look up.